For this week, we will have Rocketman DevOps engineer Chad Lawson presenting for the umpteenth time, this time presenting on Token Bearer Authentication. So before I steal any of your thunder, Chad, I will go ahead and kick it over to you.
Thank you, Eric. It's good to be back with everybody. Yeah, as Eric mentioned, I have talked about this topic a little bit last year. When Jamf released 10.35, there was a note in the release notes that said that you can now use the classic API to authenticate using token authentication as well as bearer authentication. And then they had, that was in the release notes, and at the very end of it was a small little note to a link says, see the Jamf developer resources. And then going to the developer resources, I saw this somewhat scary little bit of text that support for basic authentication has been deprecated and will be removed. And as Chris mentioned earlier, estimated was between August and December. And so that was around late February, I think, so that the March meetup, I went ahead and talked about what does this mean, and I probably went a little deeper into the behind the scenes portion than people necessarily needed and potentially wanted about what all these different types of tokens meant. And as I've been working on this for the last few months, getting all of our scripts and our clients' scripts up to date to be able to use this, I've kind of thought about it more from a great, Chad, but how do I make this information useful for people? So that's the point of this presentation, is because that was 1035, and as Chris also mentioned, then I think it was 1041 that the default became the little checkbox in Jamf's user accounts and groups setting was that basic authentication was turned off. You had to go in to turn a box to turn it on for as long as they let us have that. And because of that August and December note in there, I would have bet anybody here really good money that we'd get an announcement at JNUC that as of this date, we will be turning this off. Everybody get ready now. And I figured it would be year end. So I figured we'd have from JNUC to year end to get everything ready. And that was kind of my hustle time of getting all of my ducks in a row and getting ready for this. But then right before JNUC, Jamf released 1041, and that exact same link now says support for basic authentication will be removed in a future release. So the sky is no longer falling, but I'm still waiting for that other shoe to drop, and I'm still getting everything ready as best I can. But I wanted to, as I've been now going through this, I really feel like I have a rhythm and a workflow, and I wanted to come back and share with you the pieces that I'm using and kind of how it's a lot easier than I made it sound a year ago. And so I wanted to come in here and give you essentially my little 3-step process, and you have no idea how much I really wanted to make a there is no step 3 joke out of this, and I just couldn't pull it off. I've got a 3-step process. So first up, what I'm doing when I'm getting ready to convert a script is I paste in a function. Now, don't bother doing a screenshot and dealing with live text or anything. There is a blog post written. I don't know if it is yet posted, but between Caleb and myself, I will commit to having that up by the end of the day. You'll just be able to copy and paste this in there. So this this little function can just be pasted in toward the top of your script. The original version I had a year ago, the variables for the URL and the basic authentication token were hard-coded within that curl string, but of so many times of having to go in and having different scripts have different variable names for those, I just changed the function to take those two as parameters. So just pasting this in toward the and I'm getting note that it is in fact online right now, so you should be able to get that from our blog. The second thing is then we need to put into our script a call to that function to be able to get that token. The blob that I've been using, in fact, it's this line here. You just simply change out, if your script is using different variables other than Jamf URL, whatever you're putting in there, just change those two, and that will go and call that function to get the token. And I do have a string then below that says, if token is unavailable, just spit back an error. I don't, especially with doing this, I don't want to then start making subsequent calls and having more and more errors kick up as I did in some of my early testing for this. If the token call didn't work, then every subsequent API call failed, and it was really obnoxious filling the logs with that junk. Now, you'll notice the second variable in here says basic auth. And that is essentially taking your username, password, all of that, and suppressing the new line at the end of it. We don't want a new line tacked on at the end, and running that through a base64 encoding. And that's what we use as basic token authentication. If your scripts are still you're passing in username and password, then I have this line here that you can uncomment and pass in whatever your username and password are. It will then generate that token, which you can use in the next line. And then after that, it's just a matter of search and replace. Go through your code, and anywhere you have the authorization basic header, change that to authorization bearer, and you're good to go. So for most of the work that I've been doing, and for all of in my tenure with Rocketman, I have been exclusively writing all of my scripts using the authorization header. But for some of my older scripts, as I was going through this and I was finding older scripts written by other people that may use one of these formats you may have seen, maybe using with curl -u and p for username and password, and my 400 and CCE notes are full of -u username : password calls. And for my last 400 class notes, it has -u, and then it has that base64 encoded username and password. And as I presented, Chris also mentioned during the Gravity Times my presentation on API security, and how as of right now we're still passing in everywhere we go username and password in base64 encoding, and that is not cryptography. It's not much better than a little Orphan Annie decoder ring and being able to decode what that username and password is. Luckily, it's very ephemeral. It shouldn't, if you're not hard coding it in, if you're at least passing it as a policy parameter, it doesn't exist for long in any place a user can get at it. But if you're using one of these three formats, just find any one of those and change them to being authorization bearer. That's my three-step process. I did want to also then, and it looks like I'm still doing good on time, which is rare for me. Thank you very much for pointing that out, Eric. I do want to take this moment then and do my favorite words, any presenter's favorite words, live demo, and show you what this process might look like. I will admit to having cherry-picked a particular bit of code. This is a script of Chris's that can be set up in a self-service policy to upload all the logs from the computer to Jamf as an attachment. So it makes not one, not two, not three, but 4 different API calls. So all of these need to be changed. So to show you what the process looks like, I've got this little block of code here sitting as my palette to copy. I'm just going to start by copying the function. And there are a few rules in shell scripting about where something needs to go. The only real rule is that before you can use that function, you have to declare it. So I need it toward the top of my script. In a lot of, if not all of our scripts, and soon all of our scripts, you will see it toward the top, right after some global variables are declared. There will be our function list. In fact, Chris was kind enough to have main script functions. So what a perfect place to paste that in. All right, now I just need to find the first place that Chris calls that, and that's here. So I'm going to paste in that next little bit at that point. Now, similarly, like I was saying with I could have just put this in a lot of scripts. I could probably just put this particular block of code directly below the function call, because in a lot of our scripts, the API URL or the Jamf URL, whatever variable we're using in that moment, comes toward the top. In fact, it's probably defined before we get to the functions. In this case, Chris is pulling things out to get it from the Jamf P list. So all I have to do is take API URL and say that I'm doing API URL. And since he already has he's using the basic auth string, I don't have to generate it. I can just grab his variable. And I just realized it's just changing the case, but I can leave that is. Now all I have to do is change his 4 calls to say from basic to token. And I'm relatively decent at being able to do, yeah, I can say basic. And you'll notice I mentioned there were 4. This is counting 5. And that's because my function has 1 call for that. So I have to just be mindful of that, that I'm not accidentally updating that. And I just say, all right, let's replace it, and we'll replace it. Oh, got that in here still. Bearer token. Now, like I said, I don't want to do it for all of them. I could do, in this case, because Chris used the same variable I did just with a basic case, I could say ignore a case, and now this number drops down to 4. Or if I was worried about it, I could actually just start with selecting the 4 instances I need and say in selection. I wasn't able to get a really good showable, demonstrable version of a diff, like a GitHub diff side by side in this format to be shown here. But in the blog post, I do have a diff. In fact, I think it's exactly this script where I have the side by side. You can just see the section where here's where the header gets put in. Here's where that initial call gets put in, and here are the 4 lines to change to that authentication. So that is the conversion process. And as you can see, because I've been doing this enough times, I've kind of come up with a rhythm and a workflow that I can do fairly quickly. The next challenge I've been encountering is, well, great, which scripts need updating? And that is a challenge. And Chris has joked before that if I could do everything through the API, I'd probably never use the Jamf web interface again. I don't know if he's 100% accurate, but he's probably pretty close. But the idea of going through dozens of scripts, logging into a client's or even our own web server, navigating to settings, and navigating to computer management, opening up scripts, clicking on each and every one of those scripts and going over to the scripts tab just so I can scroll through it and see if it has a call, does not appeal to me. So I created a little bit of a code, and this will also be in the in that blog post, my little belated Christmas gift to you. You fill in the user, you'll see that there will be a variable for your URL, username, and password. It then itself uses my same get API token. And then what it does is it goes through and gets a list of every single script within that server. The first call is just getting the ID numbers. Then it goes through and generates a report. It goes through for each one of those, it does another call to it and gets that script's information. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling out the name and the contents. And Jamf, if you haven't looked at the Jamf scripts API, there are two different fields that are interesting. One is contents, script contents, and it is exactly the entire contents of the script. So you can imagine seeing that in either JSON or XML format. It's a big old block of code within an XML or JSON string, and it's ugly. So Jamf has also provided script contents encoded, and that's just a base 64 encoded version of that. So it's easier to parse and get and then shove someplace and read it. But what I'm doing is the key word in all of my, if there are two Jamf APIs, there is the Pro API, which is the one that we are using. Where is my call for it? It's the one that we are using to get our token in the first place. If you use the Jamf Pro API, everything has been using token authentication from the get-go. 99, if not 98, 99% of our scripts all use the classic API, and that one always starts, and that is the one that we are now dealing with having to convert. And all of those, the URL includes the word JSS resource. So in this loop, I'm then saying, you know what, if the contents contain the word JSS resource, then I know this script includes an API call. And for my next check, I am looking to see, does it not contain the word bearer? And the reason for that is if it says bearer, that's my token, meaning it's done. If it says bearer, I fixed it. I've done it. I don't have to worry about it anymore. If not, it's still one I have to do. And what I'm currently generating is a bit of markdown. So it starts with a bullet point and by giving a square bracket that is either a space or an X, then that determines it's a to-do item. And from there, I'm generating a link. This part is the human readable portion, and this is the URL. So this is just generating a markdown list of scripts, whether they are with the X on whether they are done or not. And the reason for that is as I've been going through this, I've created a GitHub repo for my own tracking of all of this. It's private, you can't see it. And in there, I have folders for each of our clients. And in each of the clients, I have a readme.md file that I supply this information to. And that way, at the README file, I can see a list of every script and this is only generating the scripts that have an API call on whether they're done or not. And I've been trying to go back and forth because we've been updating all of our own repos so that I know which ones have it, and then tying of our different clients. It might be named one thing over here, but that refers to this script in our repos. So tying client script to our repos so that once I update our repo, these are the names and IDs on our various clients that I need to get up to date. So this script, minus my username and password, will be available for you within the blog post. So hopefully that gives you, between these things, that little three-step process of what you need to do in order to update a script, as well as this tool to help you dig through your Jamf server and look for scripts that need to be updated. Hopefully, more than just a low-level talk about token authentication, I have given you some usable and actionable pieces so that when we get that announcement from Jamf that the shoe is about to drop, we will all be able to step out of the way and let it thud safely or develop some form of umbrella to keep ourselves safe.